G'day guys, welcome back to this week's episode of Friday Knockoffs, brought to you by our good friends at Pepperjack. This week on the show, Australian sporting royalty, Bianca Chatfield. Can't wait to ask her about mentoring young athletes, her thoughts on women in sport, and also she's a new mum. Going to ask about it now. Let's go. Oh, Bianca. How you going?
Dylan.
Sorry I'm late.
Look, that's okay. I was
stuck
just
at the
sitting here on
office.
my own.
Yeah.
Like a bit of a loser.
No, it's okay. Big day, big week for me. How's your week been?
Do you know what? My week has been a big celebration of netball season is done and it's over, and we've just been up to Daylesford for a little escape and loved it. Just chill out time. That's what I needed.
Unbelievable. It's always good to get away. Daylesford though, what do you think of that? Because I love that place.
I've been up there always work-wise, you know, to go up there and do a talk or, you know, some coaching or whatever it might be. And so this is the first time that my partner, myself and my little baby girl went away for a couple of days and just did the things that you do up there. Enjoyed, you know, going for a walk around the lake. And I know this sounds really boring, but all that stuff is just so good for the soul.
It is.
Cold weather, yet the sunshine. Ah, it was so good.
I've got a new thing. I've got to be around trees. I know it sounds really weird.
Are you a tree hugger?
Without actually hugging them, like in my mind, I technically am. I just love being in nature, and it's no science in not breaking it. We'll get oxygen from them. The closer we can be, the better, I feel.
Hence the greenery.
And hence this beautiful, real greenery here we're breathing in. Hey, what's harder, being captain of Australia or being a mum?
Look, I think mum, absolutely mum, because you know, when you're in a leadership position in a team, for me, it was always, you had the support of everybody who's going in the same direction, wanting the same thing. And mum life is still so new to me. I'm 5 months into it, and yeah, there's so much that you don't know. You literally have to just surrender and go, I don't know what you need, and I'm just going to try all these different things and see what works. And yeah, your life is not about you anymore. It's about this little baby, and we're just figuring it all out. So mum life is tough, but I love it at the same time.
I can imagine my, you know, I don't have any children yet. My sister's just had two kids. My sister-in-law's got 3 kids, and I think you just sit back in awe of like how incredible the human body is. I know that sounds weird, but like we could talk about it all day. It is unbelievable. Like the things that just go on baby and everything, it's crazy. Yeah.
From the minute I found out I was pregnant, then I would download that app and I would actually, you know, every week it changes. It'll be like, oh, the baby's the size of an apple, or the baby's the size of an eggplant. And you go through all the... And I mean, I just love... I've got a teaching background. So I did biology and PE teaching at uni, and the biology part of it all, I was so fascinated in just how my body was changing and, you know, all the different things that go along with growing a little human inside of you. And I got so addicted to the birth stories, so people's birth stories, and everyone talks about labour and how intense and how horrific it can be. But I really wanted to find out as much as I could. It was a bit like athlete life. You're preparing for something like that. And I would listen to all these podcasts in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep about other people's birth stories and find out all the gory details, because I felt like the more I know, the more I'm going to be able to cope with whatever my birth story might look like. And I just loved it. I became so addicted that my partner's like, can you just go to sleep and stop listening to podcasts all night? But, you know, I found it very helpful anyway to learn what could happen, what might happen, and how to try and cope with all the pain. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like that's a part of your personality. Like, was that like what you were as a player? Or did you love to be just across everything that was going on in the game?
Yeah, I was probably annoying because I loved to ask a good question. Like I would always be, you know, whether it was your strength and conditioning trainer who'd be like, okay, ice bars, and you go, why? And I'd want to know why. Or I'd want to know, what's the latest research? Is it to do 1 minute on the ice bath or 5 minutes? Because I'm sure, as you would have found, it constantly changes. Every year it was like, okay, we don't do ice baths, or we do them, but we do them for 10 minutes. And I was always just quite inquisitive as to, I really need to know why we actually are doing it. And I'm happy to do it, but I need to know why. Yeah. So I think that's probably held me in good stead as an athlete, but also it's probably in my own head caused a lot of confusion because I've constantly been needing to find the source of that information rather than actually being able to just relax and listen and go with it. Yeah,
well, I always say, I think naivety is beautiful in sport.
Yes.
Like if you can, the more naive you are, the better, because you just don't worry about all the external factors. I was a little bit like you, but I didn't question things enough when I was younger until I got older. And just a similar story, like I had like so many calf injuries until the end. I was like, I just don't think what we're doing is what like, I know the research is there, but I think the research is wrong because it's not working for me.
Yeah.
Like, not that I went and studied carbs or anything, but there's just so many little bits. Like, right, young athletes, you have to question things.
But in saying that too, I think it really helped me getting my head out of netball, my own sport, and talking to other athletes. So, you know, whether it was other AFL players or, you know, cricketers, whatever it might have been, really, and media connects us all in some way. But when I got to retiring, knowing what other people had gone through and speaking to other athletes and hearing their stories, that really helped me understand what I was about to go through without realising it. You know, a few AFL players, had retired just before me, and we'd kind of grown up together, and they kept saying to me, the first year, everything's going to happen, everything's going to be thrown at you, and you'll be so overwhelmed, and you'll say yes to everything because you'll fear that there will be nothing at the end of that if you don't say yes to it. And then the second year you'll get really exhausted, and you'll be very much like sit back and go, I don't know what I'm doing, who am I, you know, what is my identity without being an athlete? I don't want to necessarily be in the sport so much. And all of that worked out, even like it happened exactly as they were telling me. And even though I knew that, it made it a little bit easy to kind of go, okay, well, this is the second year blues that I go through, and then the third year, what happens next? And I think listening to people's stories, you know, and comparing it, and not being afraid to say that, you know, it's hard, or, you know, you're struggling through it, I think is really important.
It's so important. You're literally speaking straight into my soul when you're saying those things. But I was actually speaking to a friend, Samantha Gash, who's an ultra marathon runner, the other day, and she was saying the exact same thing about, you know, you have to say yes to everything. And then once you get to that stage where you're doing everything, no turns into the new yes. Because if you keep saying yes, you're going to put like 10% into 10% into 100 things instead of, you know, just picking 3 things and going all in on them. And
you know, there's this quote that says, "Say yes and worry about it later. Worry about the rest later." I've really articulated that quote so well. Anyway,
I like it. I'm going to get that tattooed. That's awesome.
I was so much of, you know, I'd just say yes to everything, and then I'll worry about, you know, the fear of it, or whatever it might be, later. I'll figure it all out. And there's part of that which I do adhere to, you know, whether it's a big public speaking thing that you say yes to and you're worried about whether you can do it, or the imposter syndrome gets you and you think, oh, who am I to go up there and stand in front of a group and talk about this? So I would often encourage myself to just say yes, and I'll deal with preparing for it later. But I totally agree with Samantha there, because especially now when I put my mum hat on, saying yes to everything you can't, and now actually having a really good think about it and having some really strong boundaries around something has to be really important, and you have to really want to do it to actually say yes to it, to leave the house and leave my little girl, and, you know, because it comes with a whole nother layer that's not about me anymore. And that's where motherhood has probably taught me that as well, that saying yes, you have to really make sure it is the right thing, what you want to do, something that you know you'll get joy out of, and then the rest can handle itself.
Love that. So much wisdom today. It's incredible.
Well, I don't need to be so wise, to be honest.
I love it. I love it. You do a lot of mentorship with some young netball academy, and also some corporate stuff you were saying before. What do you think is your favourite message to spread? Is it that? Is it setting boundaries, or what's something that you love to talk about that maybe you learnt throughout your career?
I think that changes. It's ever evolving. I feel like, you know, one year I'm like, yep, it's all about this, and then the next year I go, oh, I don't know if it's all about that anymore. So apologies to everyone I've spoken to in the past, because I think it always changes.
Me too, by the way. Don't listen to anything.
Do you think that?
I'm a big fraud here.
I cannot believe what I did 5 years ago, or what I said, and then now I'm thinking, I don't even believe that anymore. Yeah. But I think that's just me growing as well as a human. So a lot of netball stuff that I do, whether I've got an academy, and so you would do it the same. You'd do a lot of coaching clinics when you were playing with footy. I would go out and do a lot with netball, and I really wanted to have something that was more substantial, where you got to spend a bit more time with these young people. And so my academy with Victoria University came about with that. So it was like, I want to have young girls where I can be a part of their lives and support them. And it's not because they're going to be the greatest netballers that have ever played the game. It's just they enjoy the sport, and they might have missed a gap in the pathway somewhere. And rather than not have a place to go where they can keep developing their skills and keep learning, it was about how can I find and create an environment for them where we touch base once a month. They do strength and conditioning as well as coaching. And so for me, it was more about that they wanted to get to know themselves better and to understand how they can manage themselves better. That, to me, was the most important thing. And it still is now, and I still have to keep reminding myself about that, around that, you know, we are absolutely in control of what we do every day. And sometimes when I was so blindsided because athlete life was so important to me and I wanted to get a gold medal and I wanted to win a premiership, but when I sat back and thought about all the well-being side of things and looking after ourselves and making sure that we, you know, have a good support network around us, and that's the stuff that is the real core for me that's important. So the support network and making sure that you have some great people in your world that you don't always necessarily talk about the bad stuff with, but, you know, when something good happens, that you're actually okay and feel like that you can ring up someone and go, hey, guess what I just did today? Or guess what just happened to me? And be okay celebrating the good things. Because I often was embarrassed about that when I was playing, that if I felt like, oh, I had to be really humble and I didn't want anyone to think I was arrogant, so I would never want to celebrate the good things. I would always reach out when I was in crisis mode or needed help to get back into form. So that support network that you can celebrate good things with, I think, is really crucial.
Love that. Yeah, that's huge. I definitely didn't have that as a young guy playing footy. Like, you can get into that mindset a lot. Like that tall pop, you don't want to celebrate too many things. You don't want to pump yourself up.
With teammates, you feel like they're the first one to look at you and go, oh, you think you're so good, Bianca? And you're like, no, but like I've been trying so hard to get here. And we just push it down all the time. And it hasn't been until I've retired that I've realised, oh, it's those little small wins that we get. And sometimes that could be just something tiny in your day that you tick off. You're not obviously ringing everyone and saying, hey, guess what I did today? But it's those little things that you should be allowed to stop and go, hey, I actually did that today. Yeah,
I think our younger athletes now, we look at younger players in the AFL, in netball, AFLW, everything. They do seem to embrace each other a lot more and be prouder of their achievement. Like, even posting photos. We had Michael Wilson in a couple of weeks ago on the show, and like, they post his photos. Like, I would never have done that when I was like back in the day. Anyway, weirdly enough. What's your connection to AFL? Do you love watching footy? Like, how involved are you? What's the story with AFL?
So I love footy. I've grown up being a Collingwood supporter, always a Collingwood supporter, through my dad. I didn't really have a choice. He was basically Magpies all the way. So sometimes I think, oh, was that the right decision to make, when it comes with a lot? But no, my connection to footy has always been, yes, I've loved watching it. But through netball, we've always been connected through the Victorian Institute of Sport. We would train a lot out of where it changes a lot, was the Lexus Centre, that became the Holland Centre, but we'd train a lot out of there. And that was before the Magpies had a netball team too. I was always with Melbourne Vixens my whole career. But so with footy, we've learnt a lot from AFL, I think, for netball. A lot of time I would actually be training out at Carlton as well. Shane O'Sullivan, who loved netball, he gave me an all-access, you probably don't even realise this, I had a swipe into your facilities.
No, I do, I remember.
Oh, yeah. So I would go in there all hours of the night, because a lot of the time we would train, you know, at 4, 5 o'clock at night, finish by 7 or 8. We didn't have ice bath facilities in our actual training venue, so I would then go to Carlton, do all my recovery, walk on those treadmills in the ice and do all of that as I was getting older. I think you were the only one who actually used them. I know, it was kind of a bit of a novelty to start with, and then I realised how cold it was when you were actually walking in it compared to when you're just standing in it. But yeah, so I've always had a connection into footy clubs in that way, in that it's been more, I guess, teaching us more about whether it was sports science and what was going on, because you guys had more of the resources and more of the funding that which netball didn't necessarily have. So that's always been a good avenue for us anyway, to help us as athletes. And now netball's kind of come a long way, and connections in footy clubs now mean that they've got netball teams as well, which is so great to see. Yeah, it's huge. Up the Giants, the alignment's really strong with AFL, AFLW and the netball team. It's a full house. Yeah, there's I can't imagine playing actually in that environment. I would have absolutely have loved it to have been in one club that meant more than just footy, netball, you know, meant crossed over so many different sports. I think that's a great way, which they do overseas, and I think Australia are just really catching up. Yeah, it's good. It's good that they're catching up. How have you seen that, like, now? I know you finished up playing before the AFLW started, and the teams obviously came through with netball as well. How have you seen now as an onlooker in the media, like that progression of that holistic view of sport in Australia? I've loved it, and I get really annoyed when people try and compare, especially for women's sport, because it's always been fighting for whether it's the media attention, the corporate dollar, sponsorship. And it's always like, oh, AFLW's here, is netball really worried? And you're like, well, no, because actually it's so good that girls have far more opportunity to go and play. And also that if one female sport is moving forward, then the rest, it's momentum, it builds momentum. So, I mean, for me personally, like working on the women's footy, the AFLW show, I love doing that because I loved immersing myself into another sport that athletes are so similar, as you would realise. So similar in the way they think, the way they do things, even the issues that we had 10 years ago as a sport in netball with collective bargaining agreements and all of that real heavy stuff that comes around. Athletes don't necessarily love getting involved in it, but I was right into our Players Association and trying to change the conditions that we had. And AFLW, when it first started, that was the stuff that they were starting to fight for as well. So, you know, any knowledge we could share and vice versa, I thought that was a great place to be for us all to be able to do that. So when I look back on now how far women's sport has come, I think it's such an incredible place that we are now. There's so much growth, though, to still go. And I hope everyone realises that we don't have to compete, that we can keep moving forward. And all of us old has-beens now, the fact that we get to go and enjoy and watch more than just one sport, I think is great. And I hope my little girl gets to grow up to play sport. It doesn't have to be elite sport, but play whatever sport she chooses to play, and it doesn't feel limited by it.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. Like the way of how it's come in the last 5 years. I even found myself yesterday, won't mention names, but very annoyed with a couple of trades from my team. And I was like, that's just it's great. Like that's how it's becoming in AFL, which is fantastic. Changing pace, Com Games next week.
Yes.
No one better to talk about representing their country, with pride especially.
There's probably a few others, but I'll take that.
Definitely not. We'll win the room. How special is it to play for your country and represent your country?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the best things I've ever done, play for Australia. And I think one thing that sums it up for me is that we have our little, it's not a catch cry, it's like our little motto for the Australian netball team. It's Sisters in Arms. And from the outside, it sounds a bit ridiculous, you know, that corny that we're all like, oh yeah, Sisters in Arms. But there was so much that went behind that created it, that was passed on to everybody, and now it's still such a big thing. A part of the Australian Diamonds is Sisters in Arms. And I think how it really is encapsulated is that for us, standing on the transverse line, facing often New Zealand, and singing that national anthem, knowing that every single person standing on the line next to you, you're all in it together. Whether you lose, you're in it together. Whether you win, you get to celebrate together. But you are genuinely supported and backed up by these people next to you. And it's the best 12 in the country, and you've managed to get yourself into that team, let alone even if you get the opportunity to take the court in that team. It sends shivers up your spine when you sing the national anthem. And I mean, New Zealand have a great national anthem, which
it annoys me
quite often. Yes, you'd be like swaying while you're on, and you're like, I can't do that because I'm meant to be. It's all about our anthem. Anyway, sidetracked. But that moment for me was the most special part, and you don't realise it until you get in it, and then you want to be in it for as long as you can possibly do and play for the game. And so Com Games for us is like the Olympics. A lot of World Champs is every 4 years, and the Com Games are every 4 years. I don't know why, but Com Games and being part of a bigger Australian team always was really special, because we got to hang out with the other Australian athletes and see what they do, and be able to feel like that you are in Olympic Games. And for netball, it was always with Com Games. It's one of the first events that goes through to the last day, and so you see the swimmers finish and get to start celebrating, and we're still very much in game mode. And some of the best games have always been playing against New Zealand, although it's so great to see now in international netball that Jamaica, England, South Africa, even Malawi, they're so threatening towards Australia now. And I like that, especially working in the media, I get to enjoy it more, that you get to see more competitive games. But I don't know what it is with New Zealand, whether you're performing or not, they always show up. Whether they've got a good team or not, they always show up, and they're always so hard to beat. Yeah,
you could be like, no matter where the teams are at, it's going to be an absolute ripper game.
Absolutely. You could be like, top of the ladder versus bottom of the ladder, and it's always going to be such a hard game just because of the way the two teams play. And I mean, with umpiring as well, I don't want to get into that, but
get into
international umpires, right, you have for international games. So you can't have an Australian, you can't have a New Zealand umpire. They've got to be, neutral.
Yep.
So when I was playing, it was like you might have someone from Barbados, you might have someone from Scotland who, I guess they're just not used to the speed of the game back then. It was very different to how Australian and New Zealand athletes played the game. So as a defender, they wouldn't blow the whistle. It was almost like they were running up and down, and you get away with so much more internationally. So I love that. I loved that, you could get away with more, but it was just absolute contest for the ball. Whereas we often know with netball, back when I played, it was very much as a defender, you were out of play a lot, lots of contact, lots of obstruction, which frustrates a lot of people watching the game. But internationally, that was all out the window. It was just game on, do whatever you like, and whoever comes up with the ball at the end obviously wins the game.
Love that. Hey, Pepperjack, all about character. You've got that in spades. So I do have a question for you about this. What characteristic defines Australians in the eyes of the rest of the world? Great question. Like, what would a New Zealand netballer say about an Australian after walking off the court?
Look, I think definitely it's the competitiveness, but I often think it's the way we go about it. I think Australians have a confidence about them, a confidence that even if we do lose, we'll come back and we'll be able to win. We don't get put down. We can laugh off things quite easily, which I'm not saying New Zealanders can't, but I definitely think Australians have this confidence about the way they do things, and that we're very easily can turn a negative situation that might not work or might not go to plan into something that we can have a bit of a laugh about and move on. And sometimes those moments could make a lot of people very angry. And I don't know if that's just team sport, but to me, it's the confidence. That's a characteristic that we do have. Not arrogance, confidence, and it's a very fine line sometimes, but yeah, it's the confidence. And, we were talking off air before about Nick Kyrgios and that confidence he brings when he plays, and that belief in himself. And sometimes that goes a little bit too far other ways, but he'll always bring the confidence.
He definitely does. I think we're very good, and I talk about this as now a supporter of just Australian sport, and one thing we're very good at is jumping on a bandwagon. Yeah. So all
actually, you need, that is so true.
That is, like, we are the best at just jumping on the back of someone and pretending we knew everything about them.
Yep.
And I love that. But I think for Australian athletes, all you need to do is just be a really good person, and we will just follow you to the hills.
Yes.
So I know you girls did that, and they started today. But just keep doing that. Be a bit cheeky, be competitive, and you'll win the Australian public.
Absolutely. I mean, do you know one person that stands out for me with that was Peter Bol at the Olympics?
Yes.
When he ran, and all of a sudden we were watching him like win the heat, get into the finals, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh, our best mate, we love you, like. And half the people had never heard of him, yet he'd been doing so well for so long.
Oh, I was definitely that person.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden I'm like, great. Now, I follow him on Instagram, and I'm all for that.
And he was just so humble and such a good guy, and that's all we want to see.
Exactly.
Anyway, we could talk about this all day, and I'm sure there's going to be some great athletes doing good things at the Com Games. Friday night ritual. Now you're not playing. If you're not working, what do you get up to?
Oh, I think it's just really low-key family time. I know. I've really taken a step back from whether it's going to the footy as well. I used to love going to Friday night footy, especially if it was at the G.
Really?
I used to love that. If we weren't playing, if we were playing on a Saturday, it was a kind of a good low-key preparation. But even now, I'm just happy to sit on the couch and watch the footy on TV. And whether we just, I don't know, have takeaway, whatever it might be, it's just as long as we're home, warm, especially in winter, but just turn on the TV. I love it.
How good. Well, to enjoy tonight, get that TV on, get nice and warm, and enjoy this beautiful bottle of Pepperjack. That's from us to say
thank you
so
much.
Good to catch up, and best of luck with it all.
Oh, thank you very much.
Love it.
Have loved
good to see you.
Thanks, Dylan.
Good stuff.